thigh, hurroo, hurroo. And on the road to sweet a thigh, hurroo, hurroo. And on the road to sweet a thigh, a stick in the hand, a drop in the eye, a doleful damsel I did cry. Johnny, I hardly knew ya.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I am your host, Suzanne Sherman, and you have tuned into the Renegade Rambler Radio Network, where here we talk about 18th century ideas through the minds of 21st century thinkers. We are taking live calls. Our number is 717-467-1736. If you've been following me on Facebook, facebook.com/Cowgirl Esquire. You will know that my wall has been on fire because I have gotten some nationalists very upset with me because I like to speak the truth. Like I used to talk about on my old network with some other friends of mine, my friend Mark Cresslands. We talk about ideas that make people uncomfortable. They don't want to unplug from the matrix is a phrase that we used. And this has been very apparent in some of my comments yesterday with regards to the latest distraction in our bread and circuses lineup of talent, the national anthem and the NFL. I want to invite you to follow us on Facebook, Renegade Rambler Radio, and that's at facebook.com/Renegade Rambler Radio Network. We have an R3N fan page as well. You can also follow me on Twitter, Cowgirl Esquire. We have an app also that's available for free download for the Android platform. Once you're on there, you can check out all of our blogs. You can check out our shows. We have the Renegade and the Rambler show with Daniel Bailey and Jeff Johnson. They're the founders of this network. I want to thank them for getting this started and for inviting me to join them. Joining me on Monday mornings before my show, we have a 2-hour of live radio lineup. The Paradigm Shift, hosted by Jeff Johnson, who is producing me. So he is in the background. I will be calling him forth to chime in on our thoughts today. We also have the downloads for the show Brush Fryers of Freedom with our good friend Sean Hoffine, who broadcasts live on Sunday afternoons out of Tucson, Arizona. We also have podcasts from Mike Meharry from the 10th Amendment Center. I say it all the time. If you want to know more than 99% of the federal judges when it comes to our system of federalism, spend an afternoon on the 10th Amendment Center's webpage. Read their articles. By the way, if you go there, you can find the article that Carl Jones and I co-wrote regarding national reciprocity. In that article, we highlight the hypocrisy that the supposed right plays into when the guys on our side are involved in government. We are very quick, excuse me, to disavow our constitutional respects and restrictions when it comes to a policy outcome such as national reciprocity that we think would be a good idea. Yet we're very upset when the left takes advantage of their time and power into office and wants to put forth issues like gay marriage or healthcare reform. So that, again, that's a topic that I talk about frequently. I try to keep my message simple. It is a message of adhering to the principles upon which they are founded. Yes, they happened a long time ago, but I think they are valid today. And if we adhere to them, we could avoid many of the problems that we are experiencing now. Also, a little bit of news. Daniel Bailey, also one of the founders I mentioned earlier, has his show, The Bailey Report, and he is going to be broadcasting live on weekday mornings as well. I don't think he's doing this today after our broadcast, but you can catch him on the other days of the week when he is in the country. He is an overnight hauler. He's a truck driver, so he's not always around, but do give him a chance to check him out. They were also live last night, the Renegade and the Rambler, Jeff and Dan, for their show, and you can catch their recorded episode on our Renegade Rambler Radio Network. Jeff, I want to welcome you and thank you for producing me today. You had a good show this morning.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. I don't know. It just all kind of came together at the last minute. I went into some areas I wasn't expecting to go, but it was fun. I had a great time, and it really did seem to flow pretty well.
Well, you know, you followed my wall yesterday, and I think you saw how upset everybody has been. What we're going to do today, I'm going to address this issue. I think it is stupid. I have tried to stay out of the fray and just ignore it. I'm hoping it would really go away. But I'm going to chime in this one time. I chimed in yesterday, and my like I said, my Facebook page absolutely exploded with regards to the national anthem. This is not a First Amendment issue. Jeff, how many times do we see this over and over again? Anytime that we have some right to speak, some right to express an opinion, the First Amendment comes into it. And it's not an issue. This is an employer-employee issue here. The NFL rules and regulations provide for adhering to standing for the national anthem. That's their thing. That involves the employees. So, to me, is irrelevant. And what I think, because this is what I'm being told, Jeff, is that what's motivating these players is their connection and motivation of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, as we also know, has a strong link with care. And this is of concern, and the seeking of the banning of the eventual banning of the national anthem at all events. This is just, to me, a natural outpour of our caving into the demands of removing the Confederate or the Virginia battle flag. I said this was going to be a slippery slope and to expect more of the same. Are you seeing that this is possibly a natural progression from giving into that demand?
Yeah, when I was preparing this morning, I thought about talking about this whole idea of doing away with these monuments. There's a lot more to this than just the idea that they're somehow offensive. We have gotten to the point. Well, let me go back. There was another quote out of Hayek that I was going to use on that, and maybe I can find that. But this whole thing goes even further than that. It really is about. I'm going to let you go on that. I'll find this quote and I'll come back to it. Okay, go ahead and continue your thought on this, and I'll find this quote from Hayek that I was going to read, but I moved on to something else.
Sure. You know, the issue here is no employee has a right to protest at their work. As I said, this is not a First Amendment issue. To me, their motive is irrelevant, and we as consumers have a right to buy into this or not. We can choose to watch or not and let the marketplace dictate the natural outcome of this. And what I said yesterday that had everybody so upset was I compared those that are in a tizzy over this to Antifa. And the response was, how dare you compare us? But what I'm trying to say here is this slobbering, rabid response and protest for this has really been responsible for allowing this whole phenomenon to take off like it was. This is bread and circuses. If you think about it, a few short weeks ago, we were concerned that we were going to be at the receiving end of a nuclear attack by North Korea. Who's talking about that now? This is just a distraction. And again, what we need to do is consider, yes, their motive is not the right one as far as I'm concerned.
All right,
and they
I
don't
found
have
the
a right to. Yeah, they don't have a right to say it on the playing field. This is part of their job. They're supposed to do it. But the bigger question is, why do we have this? Why do we have this sense of nationalism? And is this sense of nationalism that we are seeing in response to this protest, is this the right way for us to carry on and move forward? Because remember, we were never intended, and we say this all the time, if we're going to look at this through the eyes of 21st century thinkers, at these 18th century ideas, nationalism is not the way to go. It is the source of our evils. I'll let you go ahead with the quote.
Okay. And Hayek was quoting de Tocqueville. All right. So this is what he said. Democracy, and this is democracy extends the spear of individual freedom, he said in 1848. Socialism restricts it. Democracy attaches all possible value to each man. Socialism makes each man a mere agent, a mere number. Democracy and socialism have nothing in common but one word, equality. But notice the difference. While democracy seeks equality and liberty, socialism seeks equality and restraint and servitude. So that was my first thought, was this whole Antifa thing, where they're trying to seek equality, but they're trying to seek equality through servitude. They're trying to make us servants, to restrict our freedom, to take away our freedom, take away our history. So we have to tear down these monuments that talk about history of freedom. And these monuments were a history of freedom. The southern states had the right to secede. Today, we still have that same right. We had that right in 1776. We had that right in 1860. We have that right in 2017. But we have to tear down these monuments to our freedom. And that's what it is, because we cannot have reminders of freedom.
To me, the great contradiction here is, first of all, they say, if you do not stand for the anthem, if you do not say the Pledge of Allegiance and respect the flag, then you are not respecting those who died and sacrificed so we could be free. Let me share with you a quote that was on my wall. In response to this, I'm going to try and find it. Essentially, what this gentleman said, who's a veteran, he's a good friend of mine. He said that it is your right to protest the flag, but if I see you burning the flag, I will smack you down because it is the right thing to do. Well, please tell me how, when we have these pre-existing rights that are guaranteed as a restriction on the government, the general government, and our Bill of Rights to freely express ourselves, and burning a flag is a form of that. It's a symbolic form of speech, that we are free. They have paid for us to have this right to express ourselves, but we better not do it in a manner in which they disagree, or they will smack us down because it is the right thing to do. And I pointed out this inherent contradiction, what he's saying, because I said, look, you're saying that you've taken an oath to defend these rights, but you're disavowing that oath at the same time. How do you reconcile these statements that you're making? And I don't see how you can have it both ways. The other thing is this love it or leave it mentality. You either agree with this blatant form of nationalism, which again is in direct contradiction to and contravention to our founding principles, or they're just telling you to leave the country.
Right. I've heard that so many times, that if you don't like it, leave it. Well, in reality, that's what I'm requesting. I'm requesting for the opportunity to leave. And in 1860, that's precisely what those southern states did. They exercised their right to leave. And like I said earlier in that last segment, that whole Lou Rockwell piece, that now nearly 40%, is 39% people say that the states have a right to leave. We're down to 29%. We're down to 29%. We have to now get on board. We have 40%. If we can just turn another 11, 12% of that undecided to the idea that we can be free. Freedom is more important than some flag that I have to pledge my allegiance to, or some song as an ode to the government.
And here's the thing, Donald Trump, and I'm actually in the midst of preparing an article I'm going to draft on this subject. Remember, recently he had a speech, and he also had one of his numerous tweets that in America, we worship God, not government. And I have no idea where he pulled that one out of, but this is just another example of the multitude of platitudes that are shouted out, and that, you know, these nationalists and what I call faux conservatives, a friend of mine uses the term patriotard, I think it was a little bit harsh, that they just gobble up without paying attention to, again, the principles upon which they were founded. They were debated more than anything is ever debated right now. Here is, I'm not going to get into the long quote that somebody sent me. It was written by constitutional and noted historian Ted Nugent. Okay, I love Ted, love his music, but he really doesn't know history. He starts out this long dissertation by saying, take a little trip to Valley Forge in January. Okay, now that's hearkening our revolutionary principles, is it not? Siege of Normandy, that's arguable. You know, we're now getting into the Wilsonian, the continuation of Wilsonian interventionism. Take a knee in the sweat-soaked jungles of Vietnam. That was obviously not a defensive war. Take another knee in the drenched sands of Fallujah in 100-degree heat. We have gone from our revolutionary legacy to Wilsonian interventionism in one little article here. And it's amazing to me how quickly the so-called patriots lose their focus on what we were intended to do. Remember now, they start out by talking about Valley Forge. Well, who was at Valley Forge? General Washington. I've actually been there. And, you know, what did he have to say about this? Friendly relations with all, entangling alliances with none. So we're hearkening the memory of these 18th century thinkers, but in 21st century or in 18th century ideas, but these 21st century non-thinkers are completely turning it upside down. So, hey, Jeff, can you post a link for this on my wall, please, for the show? I've got people asking when I'm coming on.
All right. The link is on our Facebook page, Radio Co link. Also, the YouTube link is also on the Renegade Ramblers Radio Network Facebook page, and I will post those. I will link them to you.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah. So, well, what we'll do right now, it's 8:20. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to continue on with this. This is the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman on the Renegade Rambler Radio Network discussing nationalism and bread and circuses. We'll be back after the break.
Are these two men in the middle insufficiently conservative for you?
Well, I think that the problem is nobody's defined what being conservative means. And I think that is our problem. Conservative means we have smaller government and more liberty. And yet, if you ask what have we done, I think we've lost our way completely. Our rhetoric is still pretty good. But when we get in charge, we expand the government. You talk about Dodd-Frank, but we gave Sarbanes-Oxley. We gave debts as well, you know, when we're in charge. So if it means limited government, you have to ask a basic question: what should the role of government be? The founders asked that question, had a revolution, wrote a constitution. And they said the role of government ought to be to protect liberty. It's not to run a welfare state and not to be the policeman of the world. And so if you're going to conservative, how can you be conservative and cut food stamps, but you won't cut spending overseas? There's not a nickel or penny that anybody will cut on the conservative side overseas spending, and we don't have the money. They're willing to start more wars. So I say if you're conservative, you want small government across the board, especially in personal liberty. What's wrong with having the government out of our personal lives? So this is what we have to decide: what conservative means, what limited government means. Now I have a simple suggestion. We have a pretty good guide, and if we follow the Constitution, government would be very small, and we would all be devoted conservatives.
Renegade Ramblers Radio Network, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the second segment here of the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman, and you have tuned into the Renegade Rambler Radio Network. This morning, we are discussing the national anthem and the demand that we all take a knee in homage to the God of government, as opposed to our unalienable right to individual liberty. taking a lot of flack for my commentary yesterday because I think we are taking the bait of being severely distracted. My good friend Dwayne Stovall, who's running for Congress, says while everybody is upset, everybody's mad about taking a knee during the national anthem, and I'm pissed that every citizen yet to be born now owes $60,000 and plus for a national debt. He also says that this is a matter of personal choice, and this is not a national issue. Are the left and the right here equally culpable in this hypocrisy? I have to say, I think they are. And as I started out with the show saying, we decry as conservatives national government, general government overreach, yet when it comes to our side doing it, we cheer on a chance to get one done on our side. For instance, the example I used was national reciprocity, which is every bit as unconstitutional, illegal, should be null and void if enacted as the Affordable Care Act. And speaking of, of healthcare, we have single payer on the way. If we don't stop this freight train, this unstoppable force, we've got single payer on the way. It has proven in countries that have a much smaller population than we do to have been demonstrably unsuccessful. Yet here we are, everybody's fighting over spoiled brat football players not standing for a national anthem. A few weeks ago, we were worried about an attack, nuclear attack by North Korea. Yet we have completely forgotten that message, and everybody is in a frenzy over what a bunch of idiot ball players are doing and the NFL is doing. This has taken over the debate. This has taken over what everybody's talking about right now. By the way, you know, we're told, God bless America, love it or leave it. And a friend of mine was telling me, if you don't like it, just get out of here. And my question to that is, do we really imagine God blessing a nation that legally sanctions the murder of unborn babies, 56 million and counting? Jeff, I have a really hard time reconciling that sentiment with the rhetoric I'm seeing right now. Are you struggling with this as well, that people forget that? Because I hear something else I said, if only we were as passionate about the issue of abortion. I said, oh, if we had the passion to stand up for the unborn like we do a piece of cloth and a song. And the response was, really, it's not just a piece of cloth to me. Or yes, we are capable of doing both. But from what I'm seeing, we're not, I'm not getting that feeling that that's what's going on. Have you followed at all the commentary and the criticism that Dan Fisher, he is running for governor in the state of Oklahoma, and he is on a platform of abolishing human abortion? Have you read some of that commentary?
I haven't really kept up with the commentary on his site. I have kept up with the posts, and I share them because, like I said in my show, Daniel and I show last night, is I've actually changed the terminology now as well, because it used to be I considered myself pro-life. Well, the problem is pro-life is just another way, just like, okay, so you have the NRA and you have pro-life. What is the ultimate goal of those two organizations? Is it to protect gun rights or to do away with abortion? No, it's about getting that next mailer out to get the next donation so they can get more money. We've had these pro-life organizations for 40 plus years. How much have they actually changed? Nothing at all. So I have joined Mr. Fisher in his terminology, because now I'm not pro-life. I am an abolitionist. I seek to abolish human abortion. And that is really all it is. But in the meantime, we're just fed this illusion of football players taking a knee, or the next Obama repeal that's not a repeal but a rename. We are constantly bombarded with things to take away from the real things that are really matter in our 50 states.
I'm going to share with you a quote from a gal who subsequently blocked me on social media, that's pretty good, for questioning her statement here. And, you know, my response was, are you a nationalist? Are you a patriot? Do you even know the difference? But my question arose from this, and here's a quote. The burning of any object is silly. Burning of the American, in quotes, or in caps, flag is an act of terrorism, not free speech. Let me interject for a moment. Now, I'm not one to look to the Supreme Court for guidance, but just as a means of interjection, burning a flag has been determined to be a form of symbolic speech. So it is a form of speech. And this is what really gets concerning to me. This country needs a giant kick in the ass for the lack of patriotism and a very long history lesson. If you can't respect the Pledge of Allegiance or the American flag, then you need to remove yourself as a citizen because you no longer deserve that right. Respect and rights are earned, not entitled to you. This is really scary because to me, this is such a common sentiment. You either like it, respect it, or get out. You have to earn your rights. We have inalienable rights. I mean, there is just so much to go on with the, I'm going to get into in a little bit, the pledge, the issue of the pledge, as we know, again, stands in direct contravention to our founding principles, and it was written by a socialist. But the indoctrination has been so complete that so-called conservatives are espousing the words proudly of a defrocked minister who was lost his sheep because he spouted the words of a socialist. She continues. When I asked her about this, are you aware of the history of the pledge? And I sent her this link from the Abbeville Institute. James Rutledge Rush is one of the most undervalued and brilliant historians I know. Her response was, what is unfair or unjustifiable about the pledge? This to me is terrifying. Listen to this. Sorry, but we need government. Otherwise, people would be running around rampant like they are now, free to do whatever the blank they want. We need discipline and obviously more of it. This country was founded on Christianity. And to me, this is this is just something that is so repugnant because Tom Mullen, a friend of mine, comments, misperception, ignorance, non sequitur, all wrapped up in one post. And I said, you forgot ad hominem. We need government, otherwise people would be running around rampant like they are now. Well, here's a failure in logic because they are already doing this, and we have plenty of government. So what does she propose? More government? You know what I'm thinking is those pictures of the protesters from Antifa. And again, here's my comparison to them. You might not like it, but this to me is Antifa rhetoric. And wants more government, and here they are with the riot squads spraying them in the face with pepper spray, and there's their more government. So, the proper role of the government is to make sure people can run around free and do whatever the blank they want. The proper role of government is to defend our liberties, not to hamper them. Jeff, were you as disturbed by this quote as I was?
Yes, I was. Sorry about that. I'm actually, again, folks, I'm doing producing in the background here. So every once in a while I get caught off guard and I had to jump in.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yes, these are very strange. So-called conservatives do not mind using government to force their will on people, just as the Antifa do not mind using government to force their will on people. I believe it's this whole cultural Marxism thing. We've all been so indoctrinated. We all want to use government for our own purposes. And folks, and we have a lot of listeners, Suzanne, and I was just trying to type this to you, but if you want to call in and join in this conversation, 717-467-1736. Suzanne will take your call and she will talk to you live. And if you want, she'll debate you if you disagree with her.
And the thing is, I'm going to repeat that quote this was a military veteran who said it's a right to burn the flag he was referring to, or to not stand up for the anthem. But if I catch you doing it, I will smack you down because it is the right thing to do. So what are we told all the time when we have these justifications for warfare around the world? They're over there fighting so we can be free over here. Well, wait a minute. You just threatened me with physical harm because I am, in your opinion, disrespecting something that you hold sacred. So please reconcile that for me with the claim that you are doing what you do for freedom. Not only that, you took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Freedom, which is qualified by the subjective feelings of others, is not freedom at all. Let me just refer you quickly to an article, again, I referred to it earlier, Bellamy's Pledge. My friend James Rutledge Rush wrote this in January 2014, and it's every bit as relevant as it is today. You also wrote one yourself. We have on my wall called The Toxic Pledge. I want to encourage people also to go to my Facebook page because there is such a long debate. I wasn't able to keep up with all the comments. But what he opens his article with is saying that the Pledge of Allegiance is neither a sacred American tradition nor a patriotic duty, but a relatively recent piece of propaganda penned specifically to eradicate the memory of America's revolutionary heritage and to indoctrinate the American people into believing lies about their history. To me, the best section of this article sentence is this: if General Washington ever heard the pledge, he would not have put his hand on his heart, but rather drawn his sword. You can read this article, The History of Francis Bellamy, again, a self-described Christian socialist from Boston. His cousin was Edward Bellamy, who wrote a novel called Looking Backwards, and it was about a socialist a utopian society where everything was controlled by the government. The pledge was written in 1892. People stand up for it by saying in 1942, the pledge was formally adopted by Congress. And in the 50s, we added under God because we were just really trying to disassociate or differentiate ourselves from the communist empire of the Soviet Union. This was in the heart of the Cold War. But remember, you have to understand that the Pledge of Allegiance has the words "one nation, indivisible." Like we said before, this is in direct contravention to the historical fact that 13 sovereign and independent states at the time meant nation, came together and formed a voluntary union. It was a compact from which they could leave at a time of their choosing. So this has turned out to be a lie. And I have to say, if you are shamed in school if you do not say it, let me take you to a case. In fact, this just happened recently. There was a 6th grader. His name was Stone Chaney. He just started, and by the way, I have Bellamy's Pledge on my Facebook page. I encourage you to read it. The history in there is irrefutable. A 6th grader named Stone Chaney just started his first week at East Middle School in Michigan. He said his homeroom teacher tried to force him to stand for the pledge. Says that the teacher consultant comes up behind me and snatches me out of my chair, using his father to demonstrate the alleged assault. I was so confused, I did not know what was going on. His justification, or his reasons for not standing up, was, I don't stand for the pledge because I don't pledge to a flag. I pledge to God and my family. And this isn't this exactly the principle upon which we were founded? That we do not pledge to any one item. We're not forced to speak. And this is what I said yesterday also. The right to speak includes the right not to speak as well. But we are so indoctrinated that you're called a communist, a traitor, for saying, I will not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. So this kid hasn't returned to school. And if you just do a search on the engine of your choosing, you will find numerous children up through high school age who have refused to say the pledge, and they are expelled from school for this. And the funny thing is, conservatives support this pledge because of the interjection of under God. The leftists support this or disavow the pledge because of the words under God. But if anybody was honest and had an intellectual conversation on this subject, it would be the progressives who supported the pledge and the conservatives who would disavow it, because there's nothing conservative in the pledge at all. Again, it is intended to create a strong central government. So let's pick it apart. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Well, no, this kid, he pledges his allegiance to God, as many of us do, and to the republic for which it stands. Well, does it really stand for this republic? And we have these concepts of one nation, indivisible. We know that it was very much divisible. That was the point of this. The phrases with liberty and justice for all. I want to hear about the liberty of the 56 million dead babies. You want to talk about justice? Look at how the Clinton crime syndicate has gone on unrestrained. Hillary Clinton obviously committed numerous felonies, yet was allowed to skate because of the recommendation of the head of the FBI, James Comey, who was also a Clinton's supporter and a donor to the Clinton what I call the crime syndicate. Said, no, in this instance, it would be unfair. Look at what happened with the IRS targeting conservative organizations. You tell me, where is the liberty? Where is the justice? Look at the witch hunt right now, because going on now, led by Clinton supporters for President Donald Trump, because they didn't get their way. I just find the controversies and the contradictions insufferable. I think my good friend Kim's on the line. Hey, Kim Chang, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
I'm doing well. I'm sorry you're a little bit under the weather. What are your thoughts on all this? How is this forced loyalty pledges? I consider them consistent with our concepts of liberty.
This subject has, every time it comes up, it's fun to see all over social media, everybody just talking about it like it's the most important thing in the country. And like you said earlier, we're talking about war and all of that, and everybody over here is fighting about a pledge. Now, the thing is, one of the things I often say as a Christian is that when people say this is a Christian nation and all that, I'm like, well, if you've been reading the Bible, you would know about idols and how that's nothing should be above Christ. Now, everybody tries to say, well, if the country is a Christian nation, then of course these two things are tied together. But as far as I can recall in the Bible, God didn't actually want an earthly king of any sort. He's the only person and the only spirit that we should be worshiping. Now, looking at Bellamy's history of this pledge should actually give people a pause. And as far as I know, I don't know if this is exactly true, but there used to be more or different words in the pledge. I cannot recall. Do you know?
All I know is that they interjected the words under God during the Cold War. But it's interesting, when I do direct people to this article, which I again said the history here is irrefutable, what they'll just do is say, well, to me, this is what it means. And to me, I'm respecting those that died, those that sacrificed so we can be free. Again, free to say what we want as long as they don't disagree with it. That's not freedom. Freedom qualified is not freedom. And they want to just ignore the history and hang on to what they have been indoctrinated to believe. I mean, I was, until just a few years ago, in their camp, and people have asked me, why do you keep clinging to this message? Why do you keep pursuing it? Because again, I will stand for the truth. I was criticized yesterday because they don't like the tone of my message. And I said, you know what? I have tried to patiently point out the history of this issue to people, and they just turned a blind eye. People don't pay attention. So finally, what got their attention was a cold, hard slap in the face when I said they were no better than Antifa. They're no better than the progressives that they're calling out, because they are doing the exact same thing, only for their policy preferences. What we're going to do is take a quick break. Kimberly, you're welcome to stay with us. And then I'm going to address an article that was written in actually 1956. It was published on the Freedom for Economic Education website, and it is about bread and circuses, and that really explains what we are going on today. An article written in 1956 is every bit as relevant today as it was then. We'll be back. This is the Wasatch Report on the Renegade Rambler Radio Network.
You won't disappear when you wear Tail Gunner Apparel custom camo clothing and all natural bath and body products for women and men too. And don't forget to ask about their line of custom home products and bed scarves. Look awesome and feel even better. Tail Gunner Apparel on Facebook at Tail Gunner Apparel and at tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com. That's tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com.
Camouflage ain't nothing doesn't go with camouflage. You can't blend in the country. You can't stand out in the fashion world.
Renegade Ramblers Radio Network. 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the third and final segment as we wrap up the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman. You've tuned into the Renegade Rambler Radio Network. We are talking about nationalism. To me, it is the root of everything that is wrong and problematic in our country right now, or I should actually say our union. Remember, we were never intended to be one nation, indivisible, and I can certainly say I do not believe we are under God. So, you know, I keep hearing the rhetoric, we need to unite, we all need to come together. And my response to that is always, why do we need to do that? The population was a fraction of what it is now. The 13 nations, the states that ratified the Constitution, that debated the Constitution, rejected the possibility of us being one national entity. It was rejected outright at the Philadelphia Convention. In fact, they threatened to, James Madison was told, we're going to shut the doors if you don't back down from what we call the Virginia Plan. Something was proffered by him and Edmund Randolph, part of which said that we would have a Republican form of government based on population alone. Well, guess what? That was rejected, and we have that right now. The Senate, the United States Senate, senators were supposed to be elected by the state legislatures. Guess what? We have become a democracy with the passing of the 17th Amendment. Also, what was rejected outright was a federal veto, misuse of the word federal, I should say national, but we use the vernacular now, federal veto over state laws. Well, that is exactly what has happened right now, only rather than it being done just by the legislative branch of the general government, it is being, the federal judges have become the henchmen for the national government. We have surrendered our revolutionary legacy. We went to war with the greatest military power on earth, Great Britain, England, over representation in government. England at the time England has no written constitution, so everything that Parliament did was de facto legal. Our parliamentary sovereignty is what we went against this system where everything they did was legal. And that is exactly what we've returned to by allowing this government to jump the rails of its restrictions, which were set forth very specifically, especially the legislative branch in Article 1, Section 8. Now we have this massive growth of our government, and we have another form of parliamentary sovereignty. We have all of these ABC organizations that are staffed by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. They're appointed for life, so they have absolutely no incentive to do their jobs well. And this is exactly what we went to war to avoid. So what is really wrong with nationalism? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with nationalism. It's not patriotic at all, because like I say time and time again, it's in direct contravention to our founding principles. But we have 320 million people right now in this continental landmass. There is absolutely no way we can all come together. Again, we knew that at the time when it was only 13 nations ratifying this new form of government. What makes us think that we could come together now? We are so different. And it makes it very easy for those pulling the strings to say that we need to be one nation, we need to come together. Because if you think who's really running this government, I'll tell you who it ain't. It ain't we the people. Our vote really does not matter. Our government is, and I'll tell you why. If you don't think so, look at President Donald Trump. He has disavowed his promises with regards to internationalism. He has disavowed his promises to get us out of these wars everywhere. So, he has done some good, but I call balls and strikes. I thought speaking of his hypocrisy, his statement with regards to the national anthem and criticizing the players of NFL, I thought that was every bit as inappropriate as Obama's statement that the police acted stupidly in the case involving the professor from Chicago and the police officer. So we have these corporate entities, the lobbyists, the international banking corporations, central banking, competing to control the behavior of 535 elected representatives, our Supreme Court, our president. Imagine if we broke this down and had 50 sovereign and independent nations coming together as a voluntary union for the specific purposes enumerated in the Constitution. How hard would it be for them to control us? If you look at it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense to see why they want to hang on to the system, because it makes it so much easier to pass all this legislation, to get people in a frenzy. I'll give you another example. Immigration is something that has become a national issue. Well, remember, if you have 13 sovereign and independent nations, immigration is up to the individual states, as it should be today. If we did not have all these federal welfare programs looming overhead, California wants to have anybody come into their nation that they want, that's fine. But that means that these people don't have a right to cross the border into Utah, for instance, and to have federal benefits allowing them to stay here. I submit to you, I don't think we need a wall. We need to stop this governmental welfare program and stop becoming a magnet on this issue, because this is really money taken at the threat of force of gunpoint from us. Tell me again how free we are, and going into causes that we don't support. Thomas Jefferson felt that this was repugnant. I refer you to Kevin Gutzman's book on Thomas Jefferson Revolutionary, particularly Chapter 2, Freedom of Conscience. What we are doing today is there is no freedom of conscience here. We are controlled by this blatant sentiment of nationalism. And if you don't love it, get out of this country. If you are caught disrespecting this flag, well, you know what? I know I went overseas to fight for your right to be free, but you know what? I'm going to smack you down if I catch you doing it. Kim, help me reconcile this for me. How do we do this?
Well, that's actually a really good question. wonder when we are actually going to not have to deal with this topic. I mean, when liberty is actually a primary value, that'd be nice. But
no, and we don't care about our liberty. We really do not. We see so many people just wanting to surrender our liberty under the auspices of safety, under the auspices of handouts. Here's something that I got in my email box from Summit County. I'm in Summit County, Utah, and it was about supporting the arts. One of the questions they proposed to me: do you support affordable housing for artists? So I'm going to have to take money out of my pocket to support somebody who was so unsuccessful in their hobby. I have to subsidize their housing with my money.
Yeah.
You know, what is free? What is free about that? I just don't get it. So this is something that I'm not going to delve into all the time with regards to the NFL. I think it's stupid. I think it's a non-issue. We have a system of fiat currency since 1913, and the initiation of the Federal Reserve. The monetary value has dropped, I think, has dropped almost 100%. We're looking at over 99%. With inflation, the value of our money, our currency, we have fiat currency, our economic condition is in decline, but nobody's really talking about that. We do have a collapse coming, and I think we need to be preparing for that. But again, bread and circuses. I want to refer you to an article I alluded to a minute ago. It was written in 1956, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. This was written by a gentleman who was an admiral. I am no prophet of inevitable doom. On the contrary, I am sounding an alarm that disaster lies ahead unless present danger signals are heeded. What specific steps should we take? First, let us stop this headlong rush towards collectivism. Let there be more special privileges. No more special privileges for employers, employees, farmers, businessmen, or any other groups. That was in 1956. Have we done this? Nope. Second, let us undertake an orderly demobilization of many of the existing powers of government by the progressive repeal of these socialistic laws, which we already have. This will be a very difficult step because pressure groups in the nation will fight to retain its subsidies, monopoly privileges, and protection. But if freedom is to live, all these special privileges must go. Nope. Third, of the powers that remain in government, let us return as many as possible to the states. For on the local level, the people will be able to apply more critical scrutiny for the acts of their government agents. Nope. Fourth, above all, let us resolve that never again will we yield to the seduction of the government panderer who has become among us offering bread and circuses paid for with our own money in return for our sovereign rights. Ladies and gentlemen, this was written January, or at least published January 1st, 1956, of Bread and Circuses by Ben Morial, a chairman of the board of Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation. And when he opens with the 20th century repetition of the mistakes of ancient Rome would be inexcusable. And I submit to you, that is where we are headed. Jeff, any closing thoughts? I do want to remind people to listen to the Bailey Report. That will be on every morning. He's going to be broadcasting live. Daniel Bailey, who is the co-host of the Renegade and the Rambler. Jeff, any final thoughts?
No, but you have about just short of 5 minutes left here. So if you have,
fantastic! I guess we went a little bit over.
Yeah, we're going to run over. I'm going to use my live anytime ability because I own this station. Because actually, we started streaming only 54 minutes, 51 seconds ago. So you have about 5 minutes. I'll give you about a 2-minute warning when we're about ready to go out. So you keep going with it.
Well, and like I said, we have one distraction after another. And when I wanted to look this up a little bit and do some research on bread and circuses, I found it very, very poignant that here we had an article written in 1956 that is so relevant today. And we seem to be headed towards this path of destruction. Kim, where do you see us in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years?
Sadly, I have always said that even though the U.S. is kind of a young country, I feel like we're going to probably, as a whole, shift further leftward before we actually see any actual change. It's like we have to hit a wall. A lot of countries have already had wars where there was a lot of bloodshed, and after all that bloodshed, suddenly everything changed. And I really hope that we don't have to get that far. I feel like America at least has the principles of freedom somewhere buried within them somewhere, even though we have a lot of collectivism that will in the end stop us from turning into what other countries went through. But I also wanted to add another point about the NFL. And I also noticed that a lot of people say that they should be taxing the churches. Well, why in the heck are we subsidizing the NFL with our tax money? I mean,
exactly.
If they're going to be talking about and of course, I don't really care if you stand, sit, walk around during the anthem. However, at this point in time, that would make the NFL kind of beholden to us. I mean, we are giving them money out of our pockets, and the government money, of course, going from the government to them. So at this point, nobody actually ever says that about the NFL, and I find that interesting.
Well, and that's something I bring up as well. You know, what we need to do is have a wall of separation between sports and government. And how many times do we have these tax bonds when there's going to be the construction of a new stadium in a community? And like every other member of the private sector, I think that sports should also be supported by private organizations. Why do I have to have money taken out of my pocket to subsidize it? Somebody also mentioned that if we have cable or satellite television, a portion of that goes to the NFL. So we are, again, being forced to support a message or an entity that we really don't want to. I don't care if they stand. I don't care if they sit. I lost interest in football a long time ago. What takes the fun out of all of this is the politicalization of everything. I mean, apparently they were even questioning noted geopolitical strategists in the Miss America or some beauty pageant about what they thought of Donald Trump. So they've got to interject it into everything we do, and it's always leaning towards one way. Like I say all the time, we have a trifecta of evil that is trying to keep us stupid. That is the mainstream media, education system, and that is the politicians themselves. And this is the message I'm going to focus on again and again and again. It's not that these people are not standing for the pledge, or the anthem or saying the pledge. It's the demand that we make them do so, whether or not they want to. Our principles of freedom, our right to speak, our right not to speak, pre-exists government, and we shouldn't be shouting about the Constitution while we disavow it at the same time. This will be continued. Kimberly, I want to thank you for joining me. It's always fun to have you here. This has been the Wasatch Report on the Renegade Rambler Radio Network. We'll catch you next week.